That concrete pad didn't look important to most people, but I knew exactly what it supported. It was part of the electrical infrastructure serving our neighborhood, and the HOA had been complaining about it for months. Evelyn Parker said the equipment was ugly. She claimed it ruined the appearance of the neighborhood. I told her it wasn't an HOA decoration. It was utility infrastructure. A few days later, the HOA sent me a formal complaint. They demanded that I do something about the transformer site. I replied that the equipment belonged to the utility system, but Evelyn refused to let the matter go. I gave Evelyn one very clear warning. The HOA had no authority to remove or interfere with utility equipment. If they had a concern, they needed to contact the utility company. They should never touch the site themselves. Evelyn took the issue to the HOA board. She argued that the equipment site should be removed and the area landscaped. A few board members asked whether they had permission. She insisted she would take care of it. The next morning, I drove past the site and immediately knew something was wrong. The equipment was gone. The concrete pad was empty, and the HOA had somehow arranged for it to be removed. I grabbed my phone and called the utility company. At first, only a few homes lost power. Then another block went dark. Within minutes, the outage was spreading across the neighborhood, and people began asking what had happened. The utility company sent an engineer named David Morales. He looked at the empty pad, then checked his system records. His expression changed immediately. He asked who had authorized the removal. Evelyn claimed the HOA had only cleaned up an abandoned structure. David looked at her and asked one question. Abandoned according to who? Then he opened the utility records. David looked from the empty pad to the neighborhood behind us. Then he checked the outage numbers on his tablet. Nearly 200 homes were now without power, and he turned to Evelyn and asked, "Why did you remove the equipment feeding them?" David pulled up the outage map, and the situation became impossible to ignore. Nearly 200 homes were now affected. The missing equipment hadn't been decorative. It had been a critical part of the neighborhood's electrical system. Evelyn insisted she had permission to have the site cleared. David asked her to show him who gave that approval. She reached for her phone and started searching through old messages. But nothing she found gave the HOA authority over the equipment. David found the maintenance records within minutes. The equipment had been inspected and serviced not long ago. There was no record showing it had been abandoned or approved for removal. Someone had acted without understanding what the equipment actually did. David contacted the contractor who had removed the equipment. The contractor said they had been told the site was no longer in service. Then David asked who had given them that information. The answer brought everyone's attention back to the HOA. The contractor's paperwork included an HOA maintenance request. It described the site as unwanted equipment that needed to be cleared, but the request never came from a utility company. David looked at Evelyn and asked who had signed it. By then, the HOA board had heard about the outage. Evelyn's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Board members wanted to know why 200 homes had suddenly gone dark, and Evelyn was running out of explanations. David explained the situation in plain English. The removed equipment had been part of the network supplying the neighborhood. Replacing and restoring the system would take time and professional work. The HOA's cleanup decision had triggered a major outage. I showed the board the warning I had sent before anything was removed. I had told Evelyn the equipment belonged to the utility system. I had even suggested she contact the company directly. Instead, the HOA chose to act first and ask questions later. That evening, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. They reviewed the records, the contractor's work order, and my earlier warning. The consequences of Evelyn's decision were now impossible to ignore. The board voted to remove her authority over maintenance decisions immediately. Hours later, the first lights finally came back on. One street after another returned to normal. Evelyn had removed something she never understood, and 200 homes paid the price. As David watched the lights return, he looked at me and said, "Next time, maybe they'll ask what something does before they remove it."